Um, the last topic I wanted to like broach for for this podcast is something that I think is really interesting. Like you mentioned, the importance of building a foundation for like nonprofits, right? I want to talk about like building like foundations for relationships. So you mentioned to me like in the past, like when I was like early on, like early in college, like I think Ruth was my PL when I was like my second semester freshman year, and Ruth always bragged about like her
Oh my God.
100% matchmaking skills. And unfortunately, Ruth has never like matched me with someone. So
Whoa.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about like what you think is important for, having these strong relationships between partners, like what you found to be successful based on your own track record as an amazing matchmaker.
I will clarify one thing. This started off with one of my like really good friends, Vicky, and I were really bored in college, so we used to just set up friends with each other, and we definitely don't do them now. And we just said it just because like we were just like really bored. We did set up some relationships, and but anyways, to answer your question for that is I think I'll take a step back in saying what I think is important in terms of like relationships. I will not say I'm an expert at all. I think if anything, it was definitely a huge joke. Um, is that I think it is very important to date someone who treats you right. And I will say another thing is to date to kind of know what you want. And what I mean by that is that, and I and this might not apply to everyone. I always say that a lot of what I say might not apply to everyone, but this is my take on it. So there's a lot of disclaimers on stuff. Is that again, you don't really know what you want. You can guess all these things, like you want someone who's funny, you want someone who's intelligent, you want someone who, there's baseline criteria that you want in a person, but in terms of what you really want, it takes time. It comes, like the first job, you're not gonna love it. You think this beautiful crafted idea that this is the perfect person, or this is the perfect job, or this is the perfect whatever, but it's different when you're in one. But I think the baseline is that the person treats you right. If anything, I had different friends always in like all these poor relationships, but I always said like the next person you get it set up right. And I always use one of these examples. I won't name names. Is that Vicky and I had set her up, and she had been in pretty terrible relationships in the past, and she never really knew her self-worth. And I'm not saying that you need to date someone to find your self-worth, but dating someone who treats you really poorly makes you question your self-worth. And for her, I remember her saying like, oh, this person wants to hang out with me, or they're texting me back. I was like, that's baseline stuff. You shouldn't be thankful for someone else, the next person you date, for doing that to you. And it made me really sad. And so we set her up with this one guy, amazing guy, who was one of my really good friends. And I thought they're pretty similar in values. Like, why not check it out? I never thought that they would end up with each other long term or anything, but I thought he's going to treat her right. Whether or not they end up with each other, at least she knows what dating a good guy means. And it could apply for boys too, what dating a good girl means and what it means to kind of have someone respect you too. And so hopefully the next person you date, that's your baseline. It's no
Hmm.
longer this wonderful thing that is happening, but it is something you deserve always, with someone to respect you, to care about you, and pretty much like not make you feel terrible about yourself. And funny enough, they're still dating now. It's been like almost 3 years for them.
That's
And
so cute.
whether or not they end up with each other, the next person or whoever she dates, she'll know that like she deserves a certain amount, if not the world. But in terms of like building strong relationships, I think you kind of, again, with this concept of dating around, I think I dated like different types of people, and it really made me realize what I didn't want in a relationship and what I really wanted in a relationship. Um, one thing I always make fun of, and I always say, is like the person has to think I'm objectively or subjectively funny, and I don't need it, and they just need to laugh at my jokes and feed my ego, whatever. Not necessarily true, because now I realize I really want a guy who's like equally funny, or like at least has the same type of humor, because that is such a big component of either my personality or what I value in people. I also really wanted them to, be able to talk about, certain types of subjects or a whole breadth of things, because I realized for me, like, I don't really care about like doing all these crazy things, but I like really value a good hearted conversation. I think it really means the world when I can talk for hours with someone that is beyond like the latest thing that I bought or whatever. And not to say that is like a bad thing from people, but it's just like I realize like I get like bored pretty easily as a person, that I want to talk about these super abstract like things. And I'm not saying I'm an abstract person, but you know, it's kind of fun to play puzzles in your head with someone. And I think another thing is that I realize in a really healthy relationship is to talk through things. I think people always say that you should never change for someone. And I don't think you should compromise your values, but you'll have differences with people. And I think when you're able to talk them through and really share what you value in a relationship, what they value, and kind of find a compromise. Like for me, I think we talk about the 5 love languages, and Ethan and my whole like team that I had at TVG would speak to this. I made them take this 5 love languages test. For me, it's acts of service is like the top one, meaning it means the world when someone kind of does this, like I'm always super busy or something, and they do something really simple for me, whether it be, you know, like help me. I'm trying to think of something that's terrible. Let's say I didn't wash the dishes, and someone is kind enough to wash the dishes for me and didn't have to ask me about it and just did it. And I think it's them caring about me to do that. But if it's for someone else, let's say his main one is like quality time. It means I should really put away my phone and like sit and like talk to him and like actually share those like uninterrupted moments with him. Or it could be different, you know, if his was physical touch, then maybe you kind of put your hat, like you give him a hug from now and then and kind of like showcase that you are making that effort for them. And really it comes down to like communication and trust and all of that, and like talking things through. That really makes a difference with like different foundations for relationships that I've seen myself. But that's more into the relationship. But like selecting your partner into there, you kind of have a baseline. You kind of like date different people and you realize like what traits are most important to you. But at the end of the day, I think like not a lot of people agree with this, but I think like you can fall in love with a lot of people, and a lot of people can be perfect for you. But what can, and I learned that from my friend when he said it, kind of blew my mind, because I think we're always on this one track mind thinking we romanticize a lot of what we're in movies. Is like there's this one person and you have this huge spark and you fall in love and they're great. But I think it's actually, he said to me, he's like, I think I could fall in love with a lot of people. I was like, what the? That's like blasphemy. He's like, no, there's plenty of wonderful people in this world, but what changes is when you grow with a person. So there's that initial point that you meet them and it feels amazing. But what really determines a relationship is how much you're willing to work for each other. And loving someone is hard. Like it is so hard sometimes because we want to be selfish. We are so irritated when, you know, they tick you off and you want to like not talk to them anymore, but you're willing to work through it. And I think that's where the components of experience things together, where you grow with each other because people change, like what makes the relationship better and not quitting. And I used to make this joke to my friends is like, at the 6-month point when I date someone, I get really bored and I just like stop caring. But I was like very young and I'm naive and thinking like when things get hard, I quit. But I realize now, like a lot more mature, is like, no, you kind of want to put in the effort and you choose, and it's a very active thing. And people don't talk about that enough, is that it's an active pursuit to constantly want to love and care about another individual that isn't yourself. It's easy to quit and like them for a little bit, and when it gets hard to find something else and get like, you know, re-stimulated when you're in the chase or when you're early part of your relationship. But now when I'm like dating this one guy for a year and a half now, which is the longest I've ever been in a relationship, he's like taught me so much. But also just watching other people is like, you actively have to do things and want to care and want to love and want to just kind of, I won't say the word compromise, but like just kind of find, like, again, I don't know what I'm trying to go with this, but essentially it's work. But at the end of the day, the crux of it is like, we have the same values, we can communicate, and we're willing to put in the work to make like a good relationship. Whether or not I will like end up with this person, but it's taught me like into my next relationships or any relationships that I'm in, those are some of the key qualities that I need to do and have to do to have like a functional relationship.